Vice President Sara Duterte's Chief of Staff, Attorney Zuleika Lopez, has been summoned to appear at the Senate Impeachment Court. Good morning. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is At the Forefront. House prosecutors tackle Vice President Sara's threats to the first couple and former House Speaker Martin Romualdez on the second day of the impeachment trial. Today, the testimony of NBI Senior Agent John Mark Calilong will continue. House prosecutors also plan to summon VP Sara herself. In his opening statement, House prosecutor and Iloilo Representative Lawrence Defensor said the grave threats issued by Vice President Sara are the strongest allegation against her. To give us insights on the trial of the Vice President, we'll be speaking with Atty Joel Arzaga. He's a managing partner at the Arzaga and Associates Law Office. He's also a faculty member at the University of Asia and the Pacific. Good morning, Atty Joel.
Good morning, Attorney Karen. Good morning, everyone, and it's good to be here.
Okay, let's start with the news about the prosecution calling for Attorney Zuleika Lopez to appear. So that is VP Sara's Chief of Staff.
That's correct.
And he has been subpoenaed to testify at the impeachment trial. Do you expect Attorney Zuleika's testimony to have the effect of helping the prosecution or the defense in this case?
Okay, well, first, let's try to anticipate what the testimony of Attorney Lopez would be for. I see that this will be used to establish context and to give a clear picture of what happened in November 23 of 2024, during which the alleged grave threats were committed by the Vice President. And her testimony would ultimately be used by either the prosecution or the defense for us to have an insight into the state of mind of the Vice President when she made those utterances. Remember, what we're trying to prove here, what the crux of the matter is whether or not there was grave threats. And for grave threats to be appreciated, the circumstances in which the utterances were made will be considered, the manner in which the statements were made will be considered, and the person who made it will also be considered. So here I see the prosecution using the testimony of Attorney Lopez to establish one thing, which is the fact that there was intent on the part of the Vice President to carry out the utterances during that online media briefing. Now, on the part of the defense, I see them using the testimony of Attorney Lopez to diminish the gravity or the seriousness of the utterances made by the Vice President. They could probably say that the statements by VP Sara was just an emotional response, an emotional outburst as a consequence of the eventful morning that they had that day, and that ultimately that she had no real intent to carry out the alleged grave threats that was made.
Okay, for the benefit of those watching the impeachment trial, perhaps it would also help to talk about the elements of grave threats. Kasi ito yung pinag-uusapan ngayon with the first, day 2 and now day 3 of the trial. No? Nandun tayo sa Article 4, which is what the defense, the prosecution is trying to establish, yung grave threats. But grave threats, what are the elements of this under our revised penal code?
Well, simply put, grave threats is any threat made by a person when such threat constitutes a crime. So applying it to the situation of VP Sara, the threat that was made was the assassination of the President, of the First Lady, and Speaker Romualdez. And the act that is, in a way, portrayed by the grave threats or carried out by the grave threats constitutes a crime under a revised penal code.
Here's my question. Does it constitute a crime if there's a condition wherein VP Sara said that I hired an assassin na kung mamatay ako, sinabi ko na papatay sila, di ba? So, pag ganun ba, would that constitute a crime? Because the crime here would be murder, right?
Yes.
Like, that would be what here under revised penal code, grave threats, a person who shall threaten another with the infliction upon the person or his family of any wrong amounting to a crime. But if it's murder, di ba, it's unconditional, meaning you're plotting na patayin. Pero kung if it's based on a condition na pag namatay ako, papatayin mo sila, would that still amount to a crime?
I would say that applying the principle in criminal law that doubts are resolved in favor of the accused, we would look at the elements of grave threats and then apply them strictly. There's nothing in the revised penal code that indicates that the existence of any condition upon the commission of the crime would release the perpetrator from liability. So I would say, regardless of the condition that may have been imposed by the person who uttered the grave threats, a conviction could still be found with the court.
And that's if this were a criminal case
That's
filed
right,
in
that's
court,
right.
right? And this is an impeachment trial right
Yes.
now. So the other question would be, would this amount to betrayal of public trust or
Well-
culpable violation of the Constitution, which would be the
That's right.
offenses that is being tried if you're in an impeachment?
That's right. So, well, the prosecution made it clear yesterday that the acts of VP Sara in making these utterances constitute the highest level of betrayal of public trust.
Okay.
It was clear from the prosecutor, who did very well. And he said that never in the history of our country had there been a vice president who threatened to kill the president. And for them, taking all the circumstances together, it constitutes a ground for the impeachment of VP Sara.
Okay, so yun ang tinatry i-establish ngayon ng
That's right.
prosecution. So day 2 of the impeachment trial was largely spent on just one witness, the NBI agent John Mark Calilong. And this was just questioning him on the authenticity of Vice President Sara's video making the utterances that would constitute grave threats according to the prosecution. But my question is, parang, di ba ang haba ng na-Google nating oras just to establish the authenticity of that video. But under the rules of evidence, courts can take judicial notice of matters that are of public knowledge. Can the impeachment court not just take judicial notice of that video? Kasi marami namang nakapanood.
Yes.
And it came out in the news, it came out in the newspapers. So, bakit kailangan pang mag-devote ng ganito kahabang time just to establish kung totoo ba or hindi yung video?
Yes. So just for the benefit of our viewers, by judicial notice, we mean that the court will take something as a matter of fact. Without,
Para hindi na kailangan yung questioning a witness
pa.
na,
Yes,
oo.
yes. So why is the impeachment court going through all the process of authentication? Well, it goes into the very heart of what an impeachment court is. As we know, it is sui generis. It is a kind of its own. It is not a court of justice. It is not a criminal proceeding, which means what is peculiar to the impeachment court is that public interest is very much imbued. It is there. The impeachment court knows that the public is watching this, that they are noting each and every move of the prosecution, of defense, and then the senator judges. So I think it's a matter of prudence that they deem to go through the arduous process so that any allegations of being unfair, of being biased, can, at this early stage, already be avoided.
Okay, so you're saying na kung sa normal court to, this whole portion of us arguing over the existence of the video and whether it's authentic could be skipped. I mean,
Yes.
generally, pwede itong pumasok doon sa when judicial notice is discretionary, that
Or
the court can...
it would not be as contentious as how it went yesterday.
But in this case, parang because of public perception, gusto rin ipakita yung video sa public.
That's right.
But there were several objections coming from the defense during the presentation of the witness by the prosecution. But I have objectively agree with several of the objections, including dun sa hearsay, right? Wouldn't you agree na
Yes.
if you're asking the NBI agent to testify on anong sinabi nung ini-interview niya na sinabi din sa kanya dun sa ini-interview, then that would be hearsay.
Yes.
But to me, coming also from the perspective of the defense, kung alam mo rin na ang rules when it applies to the impeachment court are interpreted more loosely and parang it's a long shot na hindi tanggapin na evidence yung video. Why is the defense spending so much time making these objections? Nakakahaba lang eh. I mean, di ba parang from a strategy perspective, sometimes you will choose to lose some battles na,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
meron silang mga hearsay questions, meron silang yung prosecution may times na parang narrative yung statements niya, descriptive. Pero sometimes you'll just let it go. But
Yes.
why is also the defense here very adamant at making objections?
Two things, Karen. First, I think the defense is trying to make a statement that they're ready and willing to go to war with the legalities of the impeachment and that they are taking this process seriously. So that they are looking for every opportunity to raise objections, to try to discredit the witness. They even tried for the witness to be excluded. So that to show to the public that the Vice President is on top of this situation and that they will do everything in their power to protect the reputation of VP Sara. Because we have to remember, ultimately, what is at stake here is the political destiny of VP Sara. She could be unseated because of this, and it could jeopardize her dreams of becoming president. But second of all, also, I think as a lawyer, and as lawyers, we know that there's that inherent zeal to try to advocate for your client. And I think that showed yesterday, particularly with Attorney Narvaza, lumabas yung youthful zeal niya in trying to look for every opportunity to be on the defense
Or
of
I
her
suppose
client.
if you're a litigator, it just kicks in, no? Pag narinig mo yung
Parang,
question na,
yes.
parang automatic objection
Oo,
pagka
that's
meron
right.
kang
Parang
nakikitang
instinct na
grounds.
for a litigator. And knowing the firm that was engaged by VP Sara, it's really a litigation firm, and it is to be expected from them.
Well, some say that VP Sara should just attend the hearing because she's the only person who can explain the context of her threats to President Bongbong Marcos and the First Lady and to former Speaker Martin Romualdez. Do you agree that she should appear personally? But before you answer this question, we'll have to take a short break. At the forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the forefront. We continue our conversation with University of Asia and the Pacific faculty member, Atty Joel Arzaga. Atty Joel, some say that the Vice President is the only person that can explain the context of what she uttered, diba, as to whether this is a serious threat or if she was just being emotional. Do you agree that she should appear in the trial at this stage?
Okay. As a matter of legal strategy, it would not be the wisest, especially given the fact that in this proceeding, the burden of proving that she made utterances that amount to grave threats belong to the prosecution. So I would, if I were part of the team of VP Sara, I would let the prosecution do all the work, and only when it becomes absolutely necessary for VP Sara to attend, would I advise my client to do so. However, looking at it from perhaps a political move, it could be strategic for VP Sara to attend because it could give her an opportunity to address squarely the allegations made against her. It gives her an opportunity, a national platform to show her legal prowess, and that she has all the characteristics needed to be the next president. So it's really, at this point, it's really up to the president. And she has that advantage of deciding whether or not she finds it necessary to appear.
Well, nagkaroon naman ng pre-trial. So we know the order in which the witnesses would be called
Yes.
because that was something that was settled during the pre-trial. Pero kahapon, Tuesday, Vice President Sara was in the Senate premises to meet with her defense team. At may mga nagsasabi na dapat pumunta na rin siya sa trial. But if we saw how day 2 unfolded, if she appeared, she would have just been sitting in the sidelines.
That's right.
Kasi ang pinatawag na witness talaga is
The NBI
si NBI agent Kalilong. So, I mean, why does the House prosecutors, like for example, Terry Rodon, keep egging her on na kung gusto mo ng bloodbath, bakit hindi ka pumunta? What is their strategy behind that? Because I think as lawyers, we all know na kahit pumunta din siya doon, hindi naman siya papapuntahin sa witness stand.
That's right. I think the prosecution wants to engage her in a battle, no? Na talagang to put her on the spot, to ask questions that she may not be able to anticipate, with the end in mind of destroying her credibility as a potential presidential candidate in the next election. So we have to keep in mind that all of this is happening very close to the presidential elections, and there have been talks saying that this entire process is aimed at hindering the presidential run of VP Sara. So it could be that the prosecution just wants to put her on the spot and then to try to picture her as someone who is not able to carry herself in such a way that would be presidential.
At what point can Vice President Sara be forced to attend? The prosecution has reserved the right to
Yes.
call her as a hostile witness.
I would say that only when absolutely necessary. I would say it depends more on the impeachment court. If the impeachment court finds that the pieces of evidence presented are not sufficient in order to make a ruling, an honest to goodness and just ruling, then it could VP Sara could be compelled. But then again, of course, we know that it is not a guarantee that she will actually be called to the witness stand, especially since her constitutional right against self-incrimination applies in this case, which she can invoke to refuse taking the witness stand altogether.
So, interesting, no?
Yes.
Hindi pa natin sure kung at what point natin makikita si
Tama.
VP Sara. Either sa witness stand or
sa
doon mismo
Senate
sa
gallery.
court. Oo, di ba? Sa court itself. So, now when it comes to this issue with the presiding officer, lawyer and Duterte ally Israelito Torion, together with other lawyers, have questioned before the Supreme Court the designation of Senator Chis Escudero as the presiding officer. Do they have a case? I know that what they're questioning here is the legality of the June 3 amendments that were made with a quorum of 12. But what is your take on this from a legal standpoint?
Okay. I honestly don't see our Supreme Court undoing or overruling an act of a co-equal branch of government. I see the Supreme Court leaving it or considering this as an internal matter which is within the political power, or meaning it's a question of policy, a policy decision made by the Senate. And the fact is the Senate is convinced that they had a basis for proceeding with the election of Chis Escudero as presiding officer. They cited the rules of impeachment that was approved by the Senate during that special session. So it's a daunting task for Attorney Torion and others to prove that there was grave abuse of discretion that would warrant the Supreme Court overturning or undoing a political act by question of policy by the Senate.
Yeah, and for me as a lawyer, reading the Constitution, wala naman kasi talagang
That's right.
nakalagay sa words dun sa Constitution na pagka ibang tao other than the President, that the Senate President should be the presiding officer. So it would be up to the rules
That's right.
of the Senate. So the only question here is whether the amendments were correct,
That's
right?
right. That's
And
right.
as you said, it would be unlikely for the Supreme Court to intervene. But theoretically, kung sakali man mag-intervene yung Supreme Court and later on they say that the amendments were not valid, what would be the effect of that on the trial that had already started?
I think it will not affect what has already transpired. It could be considered as an operative fact. All the pieces of evidence presented, the testimonies rendered, I think would remain. If at all, the Supreme Court would just probably remedy the situation by directing the Senate just to change the presiding officer and nothing more.
How would you rate Senator Chis Escudero as a presiding officer so far?
He's very good. Watching him really shows his experience as a litigator, and it shows how he's able to control the proceedings. He's able to control it in such a way that there's no one party, no one lawyer dominating the entire proceeding. So his rulings on the motions are accurate, and it shows that he knows the law well.
Yeah, I agree. Nagalingan ako.
Yes,
Parang
yes.
sabi ko nga, so I think in the end, okay din na talagang lawyer ang kinuha nilang presiding officer because the way Senator Chis has been handling it so far, I have to hand it to him. I think he's been presiding over the trial very well.
Yes.
At mabilis siyang mag-rule on sa mga objections or any matters brought up to him. So, with Senators Jinggoy Estrada and Senator Rodante Marcoleta now under detention, if they are unable to participate in this trial, do you think this would have an effect on the perception of credibility of this impeachment trial? I guess because we all know as lawyers that the impeachment is not only legal, it's also political. So, of course, a lot of people are questioning the timing of the arrest, diba? Without going into the merits of the case, it's more of the timing kasi kung kailan sila na-aresto. Do you think this would have an effect on yung perception of fairness of the impeachment trial?
Well, without commenting on the required number of vote, which Chief Escudero yesterday is now pronounced is now a justiciable controversy, I'd say that the fact that there could have been 24 members participating and voting, and then all of a sudden, 2 were arrested in such a parang record-breaking time from the filing of the complaint to the arrest, makes everything a little bit suspect. Na parang bakit mabilis yung mga pangyayari at bakit nangyari ito nung araw mismo, referring to the arrest of Marcoleta, nung araw mismo ng pagsisimula ng impeachment trial. So, this could be questioned later on, but perhaps not before the courts of law, but before the court of public opinion. I'm sure that this issue, whatever the outcome of the impeachment is, this issue will be talked about, particularly going to the next presidential elections.
And lastly, since you mentioned this issue of the voting threshold, at the opening statement of presiding officer Senator Chief Escudero, he mentioned the constitutional provision as to the votes required. And it is 2/3 of all members of Senate. But the question now with others is, should we follow the letter of the law? Merong mga constitutional law experts that say, dapat spirit of the law, kung sino na lang nandun. Do you see this reaching the Supreme Court, this question as to what the voting threshold should be?
Yes, I think Senator Escudero yesterday was giving an opening to those who may be interested in bringing this question before the court. And personally, I would love to see what the court has to say about this. But also personally, I'm an advocate of textualism, so I'd like to adhere to the strict letter of the law. If the Constitution says majority of all members, then it should be that way. When the words of the law of the Constitution are clear and unambiguous, it just has to be applied strictly.
Okay, it's really going to be exciting, no? Not just for the trial itself, but that question talaga, yung threshold number of votes to convict. Thank you so much, Attorney Arzaga. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
The impeachment court has started tackling the Vice President's threats to the first couple and former House Speaker Martin Romualdez. Some say this is the strongest case against VP Sara. With only day 3 of her impeachment trial, the public will continue to monitor how this progresses. Be informed, be insightful of the news. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Always stay at the forefront.